Brian is our Vice County Recorder, BSBI Vice County Recorder for East Ross. And Brian, over to you. Tell us about your lockdown year.
Yes, well, it's been a funny old year. As you may know, I spend half my time in Dundee and half in East Ross, but I was confined to Dundee very much for the lockdown time. Now, as well as doing general recording for the BSBI in East Ross and for the BSS in Dundee, I've done some special projects, not very high-powered stuff, but I would suggest to you that there can be interest and fun by adding some special projects onto your general recording. Next slide, please. So, 50 Dundee Walls. These were walls around my house in East Ross, in West Dundee rather, stone mortared walls. And I looked at 100-metre sections and made several visits in the early summer. 54 vascular plant species. Now, keener eyes might have found more. The striking thing about Dundee is that the small ferns, Asplenium trichomanes and Asplenium rutimeraria, are really very widespread. Also quite a lot of ivy-leaf toflax and Malaria muralis on these walls. I think this may be because of the frequency of sea mists. I mean, we've just had one today and the sun's just come out now because it contrasts with other places. The other thing I found was that the small ferns and the plants in general were more concentrated in the upper parts of the walls. I looked at 0 to 1 metre sections and 1 to 2 metre sections. I look at the Asplenium trichomanes, maidenhair spleenwort. Only 18 plants in a sample of walls, 0 to 1 metre. 1 to 2 metres, 228. I mean, there's amazing difference. Why? I'm not sure, actually. I mean, it may be as herbicide spraying of the pavement. Maybe people are clearing them. Maybe it's something to do with water or light. I don't know. It persisted late in the year when I looked again. So I don't know why. This is reported in more detail elsewhere. I'm going to whiz through several things here. So I'll go on to the next one. Next, please. So the next slide is East Ross. Now, I was up in East Ross in the summer and I looked at walls in quite a different way because I was repeating a survey I did in 2011, looking at plants on walls in the old part of towns, small towns, vascular plants that had not been planted, again, mainly mortared walls. But this time, I also looked at 20 rural walls. Now, these were not matched, so you've got to be cautious about making comparisons. They were mainly dry stone and heavily vegetated. Number of species not strikingly different, but there were only for 44, about half of them were in common. Masses of dandelions in both. Polypody is very prominent on the rural walls, and where it's present in great quantity. Comparing this with 2011, no great change. So the walls are holding up. Numbers are not very high compared with some English surveys, but maybe it's my eyes, I don't know. But anyway, that was an interesting finding. Next, please. And then back to Dundee. Well, here I was in Dundee, stuck down again. And this was again in the early summer. 25 Dundee streets, again the ones near me, but I wasn't looking just at walls this time, I was looking at pavements and roads. Now, I'd done this before in 2001, so this was a 19-year follow-up. 2001, I found 90 species in these streets, wild plants this is. 2020, 89. No great change. Conservation continues, sort of. 30 were different. Some of this may be chance. Annual meadowgrass was top of the pops on both occasions, but there were some gains. Now, I've got to be cautious about this because the time of year wasn't exactly matched. And of course, the council are busy spraying. Certainly in 2020, they sprayed in between my two visits, but certainly Thailcrest, Germavanum, Sojourner procumbens, Epilobium ciliatum, Campania poscarskiana increased. The Campania is quite striking. It's a beautiful garden-scape, but that's really on a lot of walls, actually, particularly around here. Going in December, there were 59 species, so it held up quite well. Going in February, oh, crush, hardly anything in February. So again, 19-year follow-up, no loss of biodiversity. I would suggest to you, as recorders, you can be in a position to do long-term surveys of that, an ordinary research grant doesn't let you do. Next, please. Then railway stations. Well, as some of you may know, I've got a flat in a railway station at Fern by Tane, so always taken a keen interest in railway station plants. These are wild plants that grow on the public areas of railway stations, platforms, car parks, disused goods yard. When we first went to Fern by Tane, it was a mass of flowers on the station. It was striking. And looked at the 12 stations that are in Vice County 106 east of Ross on the far north and car lines, wonderful railway journeys if you haven't done them. And in 2001, there were 186 species. 2020, crunch, 114. What's happened? Well, Network Rail took over. Rail track had been pretty slack really, but there were some beautiful floral displays. Now herbicide, men coming, checking every day, fencing bits off, but some interest still lasts. I mean, you know, some Vice County record, new Vice County records. I mean, common broom rape and two orchids are on the station by me at Fern still. So, but there has been increased management. Probably can't avoid it. It's a shame, but you know, people like their rubbish stations to be reasonably looked after. Comparing urban stations with rural stations, there was no great difference. They're both heavily managed. So there wasn't the same increase in aliens that I saw in the town surveys. Next, please. I should have a cemetery slide there, Jim. Oh, folks should have graveyard slide. No, no, maybe not. If I also looked at graveyards, and the slide seems to have gone adrift, but I compared cemeteries with in East Ross, rural and urban, and there was no great difference. They were pretty dull actually, although some things like saxifrage granulator hang on. And Dundee cemeteries have more species than the rural cemeteries, which was surprising. So this illustrates, I think, that general recording is fun. You know, you can both for the urban flora and for the BSBI. But if you do little projects, I think it adds to the interest and can be combined with recording. You know, so I would suggest it's worth doing. Now, this was about habitats, but you can't do them about species. Andy Amplett's done some fascinating species studies. So there we are. That's my lockdown summer and winter. It's been fun. So that's my year. Thank you very much. You're muted, Jim.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you very much, Brian. That was great. Sorry about the last slide. I've always been disappointed how dull our cemeteries are in Scotland. They are real biodiversity deserts, aren't they? I think they're just too well managed. But I was interested to hear that you found more species in Dundee than some of the village and town cemeteries around. And as you say, that is a great example of how recorders and botanists can direct their recording into little projects to address particular issues and focus their work. Now, we don't have time for any questions, so thank you, Brian.